Hi, this is Elizabeth from Felted Sky Studio, here with the instructions for our Lavender Fields needle felting kit. So if you've purchased the kit, there are just a few other things you'll want to have on hand before you get started. The first one is a foam mat for needle felting. So this is the one that we carry, but if you already have one or you've picked one up from a different source, that's fine. You just want to make sure it is nice and dense foam and thick enough that your needle is not going to poke through it. You should also have a sharp scissors handy. And if you want to frame your kit, it would be a good idea to pick out a frame before you get started. And I'll show you why in just a minute. So that's one of our frames, but you can find any frame and make it work. So let's go ahead and open up the kit, and I want to tell you about what's inside. Just going to pull everything out here. Okay, so the first thing you might notice is that there is indeed an instruction sheet. So if you're already watching the video, that's great, and it's definitely the best way to learn how to do the project. But this is still handy if you want to follow along. The first thing here is that there is a little color chart. So this shows all the colors of roving and batting that we're using, and I do call them by their names during the instructions. So if you want to familiarize yourself with those before we get started, that's a good idea. Also, each of the steps is numbered with a picture. So if you decide you need to go back and look at something again, or something like that, each number also has a timestamp. So that coincides with the video, so if you need to go back to a certain part, you can go right to what you're looking for. And of course, if you want to make it again, if you come up with more wool or something, you have this, and you can just refer to that in the pictures. This I want to show you is called pre-felt. This is the backing that we'll be using, kind of like our canvas that we're going to felt onto. I make that from Kentucky wool on a really cool machine called a felt loom. So that's that. Here is the needle. So this felting needle is a 38 triangle. That's its size. It's a good general all-purpose needle here. And it's in the foam board just for safety's sake. So it keeps the needle from getting bent or snagging on things. But also, especially if you have kids or pets around, these are very sharp and you want to make sure no one gets poked. So it's good to store that back in its foam. Or let me pull my mat back out here. Sometimes I'll also stick mine into the side of my mat and store it there. So that is a little bit about the needle. Okay, so I just want to tell you that this is the batting called Harrisville fleece that's in the kit. And as a batting, all of the fibers are still kind of tangled up more. It's nice and fluffy and springy and gives a lot of nice texture for the project. So that is a batting. And then the other wool in here is a roving. So the roving, the fibers are more aligned. They're in this thinner rope-like thing. It has a bit of a twist to it. So this is just one more stage in the processing, and this would be how it is, what it's turned into before it would be made into a yarn in the wool processing. So let me just show you this. If you have a different frame, or even if you have one of our frames, you want to make sure that your piece of pre-felt is going to fit right in there. So this one does, but if you are sizing for a slightly different frame, try and cut down your backing before you get started so that you don't have to cut after the fact. So you might lose a little bit of your picture at that point. Alright, so I think that's everything, and now we're ready to get started. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do is put in the sky. So I'm going to show you on the original here. We're going to use blueberry ice and the color spearmint from our roving, and we're not going to go down very far. So the sky is just at the very top. So what we're going to do here is just pull very gently. This is called drafting, and this is just going to smooth out the roving just a little bit. It'll flatten it out. And we're just going to lay it right on here. I'm going to hold, push down here, and then just pull off the excess there. So we're going to lay down a couple layers of this blue and get it arranged there. And then we're going to overlap it with the spearmint here. Again, I'm just pulling it very slightly just to smooth it out. And I'm going to lay that right over the top of the blueberry ice. And I want this to be pretty solid right at the bottom here, and then I'm going to take it and just spread it out top of this piece. So I still want some of that spread out up here closer to the top of the sky. So we have something like this, and again we want it to stay pretty close to the top there. I'm going to take off my excess here. So now all we're going to do is take our needle and we're just going to poke. And this is the poking action of the needle is just going to secure this roving down onto our backing. So we're just going to poke this all over. You can hear the needle going into the mat, but that's fine. That's how it is with this project. So you can use your other hand if you want to kind of keep the roving in place. Just be sure not to poke your fingers. That does hurt if that happens. Okay, so I'm actually going to not talk anymore right now. You can see what we're doing there, that the poking is just flattening it out and securing it. So I'm going to finish the poking with the video sped up so we can move it along here, and then we'll talk when it's time for the next part. Okay, so this is looking pretty good, and if you notice any spots where the backing is showing through, or you want to just change how the colors are overlapping, you can pull off any little pieces of roving and just attach them right over the work you've already done. So again, if you see any spots that need a little extra, just add them right on wherever you would like. Okay, so we're not going to worry about the edges right now. We're going to cut those off at the end. The next thing we're going to put on are just some little tiny wisps of clouds. So you can see in the original we have a little bit of wispy white clouds going on here. So I'm just going to pull little pieces off of my white batting here and lay them on where I want the clouds to be and kind of just arrange them however I think those should go. And then again, we're just going to poke to secure those down. So there's just the hint of some wispy clouds, and again, if you want to put in extra or make them a little more, stand out a little bit more, you just add a tiny bit more on, something like that. So when we're happy with our clouds, we're going to keep moving on here, and the next part is to put in this row of trees in the distance there. So this we're doing with our cypress colored batting here. I'm just going to pull a piece off and about that size, and I might even roll it just a little bit between my hands here to get it sticking in a roll a little bit better. So I'm just going to lay this on here, overlapping the sky. And we want to have it be not totally straight and flat, but just the illusion here of some trees in the distance. And we want to thin it out where we're going to put this other tree, this tree here. So we want it to get thinner right where that tree is going to go over top. So I'm just going to hold and pull here to thin out this one section just a little bit, and then it's going to widen out again at the edge. You can take pieces to fill in if we need to here. So something like that. And then again, I'm just going to poke, but I'm not going to poke this down to be quite as flat as the sky. It's a little bit hard to see it here, but we're going to leave it it's going to be up a little bit from the sky, not totally flattened out. So I'm just going to poke gently with the needle here. I'm going to poke the edges down first, so I'm going in kind of at an angle here, and I'm going to catch just this back edge, or the top edge here. And again, I want to try and get it a little narrower where our tree is going to go here, over the top. So I'm going to catch the back edge, and then in the middle I'm going to poke very, very gently just to secure it, but I don't want it completely flattened out. Then I'm going to go ahead and catch the bottom edge. Again, I'm kind of going in, it's a little bit hard to see on the video, but I'm going in at an angle. So whatever angle you're going in at, it's going to kind of push the wool in that direction. So since I want this to be not completely flat, I want to keep the wool kind of like that. I'm pushing from those sides so that the middle stays a little bit rounded. Then just poking very gently for the middle part so that it's secured and it's not going to come off, but I'm not going to poke it down super flat. Alright, and again, if you want to change the shaping that you have, if there are any parts of this you don't particularly like, you can just pull off another little piece of this color and add it on wherever you think you might need it. So I'm looking pretty good here, but I'll just show you that it totally works to add on. And if you've gotten it too thick or in a shape you don't like at all, you can actually take it and just pull it back off. And almost every time you can get it back off if you want to try it again. We do provide a little bit of extra fiber so that there's usually enough to fix any mistakes. Alright, so there we go, and I could even try and get this a little bit narrower here, working with that a little more. Alright, so the next thing we're going to put in is this row of light green, looking like a field here. So we're going to pull our lime batting, and again I'm going to try and pull off kind of a thin piece. That might have been too thin, so we'll use this for one side, and then we'll need to add a little more. So we're just going to put this in right next to, all the way up to that cypress. And this I am going to go ahead and flatten out. So I'm going to poke a little more vigorously, straight up and down, not at an angle. So I'm just kind of pulling this to flatten it out with my left hand here while I am poking. If you're left-handed and using your needle with the other hand, you could always start from the other side and pull in the opposite direction, or however it works for you. But we're kind of pulling this along as we go here, and it's not going to cover as much as we need it to with that piece. So I'm just going to grab a little bit more lime here, and we'll just start this one wherever we need it. If you had grabbed a bigger piece, you might not need this at all. Since I didn't. Alright, and again, if you see any patches that are where the backing is showing through, or it just doesn't seem like there's enough fiber there, just lay a little tiny piece over what you've already done and tack it on. So there we have that. In my original here, I'm just going to double check. It looks like this green, I wanted it to come down just a little bit more on the right side, so I'm going to add one more piece. Okay, so all of those fibers are now attached. I'm going to look again here, and we're going to put in this row, which is cypress on the bottom, with then we're going to go back over it with just a little bit of violet there, the purple. So again, I'm going to pull off a piece, and I'm just going to work it a little bit, maybe just a little bit of rolling, so that it's holding together here. And again, it's angled just a tiny bit down, sloping this way. Okay, so this, since we're putting the violet on top of it, this is going to be mostly flattened down as well. Maybe not quite as much as the lime, so I'm still poking it fairly gently, but I'm not going to worry too much about this because it's getting that violet on top of it. It was seeming a little thick over here, so I took part of that off. You can take the needle if it's, and even push it where you want it to go before you poke it down. It's one way to do some shaping. And still spreading this out a little bit here. I might have gotten too thin there at the end. So again, we're just going to add in wherever we need it. It's a little bit easier to add on than take off, so put on less than you think rather than more. Okay, so that's looking fine. And, well, I might change my mind and put even one more little bit on here. Okay, so now we're actually going to switch to roving just for one little part here. So this is pansy roving. I'm going to draft out the end here. You can see I want just a thin little line of this, so I'm going to pull it just enough that I have a thin little piece here. I'm going to lay it, so we're going to put this just a thin line right on the top of this cypress going across here. So I'm going to start it here on this end. I'm just going to poke right on that little thin line of the roving just to get it secured. And then I've secured all of this up to here, so I'm going to hold here and just pull. I'm pulling just enough to get the line as thin as I would like it, but not enough to pull it all the way off. So if you don't pull it enough, it'll be too thick. If you pull it too much, it will come off, which actually is okay if it does. Oh, actually I could just extend this. This is actually enough if I keep pulling here to extend the whole way. But if you don't pull it all the way off, you can just keep working it little by little. But obviously if you do pull it too much and it pulls away from the rest of the roving, in this case it works out fine. And if it didn't, if I needed to put a little more on, I would just pull it out again, overlap it, and then just poke right on that beginning spot till I get all the way over to the edge. So we're just securing that. A little bit of purple there. Okay, so there we have it. And you don't see it a whole lot, but from a distance it's just giving us that nice bit of purple there. Okay, so now I'm going to grab my violet batting again, and I'm just going to pull off some really thin wispy parts here. So we want the cypress green to show through. So I'm just going to lay this on right over the green, but I'm pulling it out so that the green is going to show through underneath there. It's not going to be solid. And we want a little bit more green showing towards the bottom, so I'm leaving most of this at the top edge here. So there's that, and I'm just going to poke very gently just to secure this on, but I don't want it really flattened. So just gentle poking right over the violet batting here. So again, if it doesn't look like quite enough to you, you can always add more. Just little tiny wisps wherever you think you could use some. or if you're happy with your first go round, then we're ready to move on. There's what we have. Now we're going to put in the tree. So here's what we want our tree to kind of end up looking like. I'm going to grab cypress again. So I'm going to pull off a piece, and if I had any extra little wisps left, and I'm going to kind of jumble up the fibers and make a bit of a ball, and then I'm going to just pull them till I get the kind of tree shape that I want. So I'm just going to kind of shape this something like that. Okay, so I'm going to lay this right on in my narrow little dip there, and for this one I think I might not want quite that much, so just kind of play around with it till you get the size and shape that you like here. So I'm just going to set that on. Okay, so now we're just going to poke around the outsides again. We want this to stay kind of popped up just for more depth. So you don't want to flatten it out too much. So as you're poking, you can just kind of think about the tree's shaping. We don't want it to be totally round. So once you've poked all the way around the edges, you can see here it's still standing up from the rest of the piece around it. So then I'm just going to poke gently on the top there so that it's a little more secure. Then we're going to put in the tree trunk with a couple of little branches. So we're taking our brown roving here, and again I pulled it out so that I have just a thin little piece here, and I'm going to secure that on one side. We're kind of making a Y, just two little branches, so that's going to start over here and then come right down into our patch of cypress and violet here. So I've secured it down to here, and then I'm going to hold here and pull. So I thin that out again, and then I'm going to just fold it back up on itself. I'm going to poke all along, and we're just doubling it back on itself there till I get up into the tree. And then I'm going to make this part Y off to the other side here. So when I get up to where I want it to split, I'm just going to pull that roving over and then pull it off there. So I have this little bit of a wisp left, and we could either cut that or double it back on itself again. I think, oops, I'm going to grab my scissors here. And in this case, I'm just going to cut that off there. And then make sure that end is poked in and secured there. So that is our tree. And I'm just going to poke a little more here. And it's still not completely flat, but when you put in the trunk, it does flatten it out a bit there. Alright, so again, you could go over the trunk if it seems too thin, but usually one time will work well. And we're going to continue on. So we're going to pull out our lime again, and here we see on the original we're putting in this strip of lime now, and this one doesn't go all the way over. I see now I could have put my cypress down just a little bit more. I might go ahead and do that cypress actually comes down here, and then we'll put this in over top. So we might fix our cypress, and then the lime is just going to come over to about here. So I'm just going to take a little bit and lengthen out this side here. Okay, so now we're going to take our lime and I'm going to pull it to thin out this piece here where I want to start. So I want kind of a point here. And then it's going to widen out a bit as we head over to the other side. Okay, so again, I'm just kind of pushing this into place a little bit. I'm gonna poke straight up and down and flatten this out. And I'm not sure I've gotten it quite up on the cypress there, so I'm gonna add just a little bit here where I see the backing showing through. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Might just add one more little bit here in this particular landscape. The way that I have my cypress placed, I think I want just a little more lime here. None of them ends up exactly the same. There we go. Okay, so now go back to our original here. So we're going to start working on these lavender rose in the foreground here. But first I'm going to put in, I'm going to define the rose with our pansy roving again. It's hard to see, but there's a line of pansy defining all of the rose here. So the first thing we're going to do is to make that line all the way across here. So I'm going to start at the edge of my cypress, and just like we did before, I'm going to pull and then poke right on that roving. And I want this to go right along the edge here. We're just going to barely see it. So poke and then hold and pull, just going along here. It's good to go over it a few times. I'm just going to pinch here and then pull off the excess. Okay, so now starting from this side, we're going to just define the rose using this pansy. So I pulled this out and I'm just going to overlap it with that initial little line we made. So I'm going to secure those fibers down, and then I'm pulling it over here to the side, poking right on that line we're making. And then again, we'll pinch and tear off the excess. Our next one is going to go about here. So I start it on the original line, and then I'm just pulling it so it's thin enough. So each one of these is the same. We're just making them wider as we get towards the center. If you need to go over one of them again, like that one looks a little thinner than the others, we'll just start another one here. Just go right over it again. That looks a little better. So if your roving gets to the point, this one kind of is, where it's too thin, I'm just going to pull off a little bit of this top part. Alright, so now this one is going to go in the same spot here again before it veers off a little bit, heading in the other direction. Okay, I think we've got it there. So now what we're going to do is put in a little bit more cypress. Grab the original here. It's hard to see, but to the left side on this side, or to the right side on this other side of those lines we just put in, we're going to put a tiny bit of cypress. So this is going to be pretty thin, and we'll pull it out a little more like we've done with the roving. So I'm just going to grab cypress and put just a little bit right immediately to the top or the left, however you're looking at it, of those pansy lines. Just pinch off the excess when we get to the end. I'm just pulling, and that part pulled off, so I'm just going to add a little bit more back in there. Just a little strip of green in here. So I'm trying to be careful not to completely cover up my pansy. That's the only thing you want to watch for. Okay, when we switch over to this one, I'm going to be putting it on the opposite side. So now I'm to the top right side here of the pansy line. And that one was a little thin, so again, I'm just gonna go over that one more time. You can always go back over with a little more fiber. Okay, so now that we've got that in, we're gonna go ahead and put in the lavender. So here's our original. Using the color Periwinkle, and we're just going to put this right into the rose. So for some places you need a really small little piece, and we're going to try and leave this not very flattened out. We still want this to have a lot of texture, and it's hard to see, but it's not very flat, it's not very felted. And that gives more of the illusion of the flowers. So I'm tacking the sides and then just very gently poking the middle of the rose so that the fibers are still nice and fluffy looking. So I'm just kind of pulling out the pieces so that they're going to be the right size. So if you can see, I'm taking the needle and pulling the fibers a little bit into their spots, right into the little point there. And then you need to pull here a little bit. So we're just doing the edges so that they are secure. We're going to pull the excess off, and again, just tapping very gently on the top so that we're retaining our fluff and they're not all the way flattened out. So some pieces will have more color in them. If you want to capitalize on that, you kind of pick the parts to show where you have the nicest color happening. So again, along the edges, right up to the cypress and the pansy, poking there and leaving the middle not very flat. So you can see how lovely this wool is. It really lends itself well to this application because of the color variation. It's giving us nice highlights, little shadows, and we don't have to do anything but just gently poke it on there. So again, I'm trying not to cover the dark purple of our pansy roving that we put in there, or the cypress. We're just going right up to the edge of both of those. And again, if you have any little spots that are not all the way covered, you can always add another little piece in there. And I'm really hardly poking at all on the middles of these, hardly at all. And we're going to go back through with just a little bit of violet at the end, so that's going to go in the middles, the middle of the rose. Okay, grabbing some more here. I think I'm going to go ahead and speed up the video for these last two. We're doing the same thing on all of them. So we'll just move right along here. And we are getting very close to being finished. Okay, I'm also going to take just a little piece and put it in here up on the cypress. I need to go over that with 2 little wisps there. Okay, so now I'm getting that a little high there. Okay, now we're going to go back in with our little bit of violet. So here is violet, and let me show you what we're doing. So we're just putting in a little bit of this darker violet color, kind of in little lines here, just to give us a little more shadow and definition here of the presumable lavender flowers. So we mostly want the lighter periwinkle color to show through. We're just doing a little bit of this. It's close to the cypress here. So more of it down near our green lines. And if you ever see a little piece of vegetable matter or some little piece of fiber that looks out of place, just take that right out. Okay, so I'm going to put just a little wisp of this next to our green line here, and then a tiny bit going across, making it look like different plants here. So we're just after just a little bit more dimension. And I'm going to put a few, just a little bit going across the row here. Like that. And we're not aiming for perfection here. We want it to stay very organic and just give the sense of a little more dimension and definition here. Just poking enough that they are secure, but again, not flattening them out. And again, on this side, we switch to the other side where we're still right next to the cypress line. Sometimes as I'm going along, I'm seeing fibers kind of sticking out where they're not supposed to be, so you can always go over any other sections when you see spots that need a little work. And we're just going to end here with a little bit of violet at the bottom of this extra little periwinkle patch we put in here. There we go. So I think we are finished. So now the next thing we're going to do is take the piece off the mat. We're just going to pull it up and turn it over, and this is where we're going to use the scissors to trim the edges. So just right along a piece of pre-felt here. Alright, so we'll just discard the excess, bring our mat back here. Sometimes when you pull the piece up, any fibers that were not well secured pop up. So at this point you can just go over things that look like they might need a little extra poking. Do the sky here. I'm not going to do the clouds as much, but I'm just working on flattening out again the sky that we made with the roving. So I'm going to go right up to our tree line here, but not on it. So that way, let's see if I can show you. That way we're still having some dimension there. I'm going to just go over my fields here one more time. And again, not doing much with the tree, so that's popping up a little bit. Do this field. And then I can look at the rows here and see if there are any last little adjustments I need to make. Looking pretty good. Okay. So the very last thing I will show you is how we will put it into the frame. If you have your own frame, then from some other source, you'll figure that out. I'll just show you with our frame here. I'm going to fit it right in. At this point, you may need to trim your edges just a little bit again. This is fitting fairly good, but you may need to trim a little bit more. So we're just going to put it in here, and that's what we have. So I hope you enjoyed this project, and I hope you like the way that yours turned out. And you can always find us for any comments, questions, or to see our other kits at Felted Sky on Etsy or feltedsky.com. Alright, thanks for joining me, and happy felting!